It's time now for business, and I'm joined in the studio by Yuka Roye. Hi, Yuka.
Hello, Hexie.
We're starting with news from the United States, where the Senate has voted to extend the country's debt ceiling.
US senators voted 50 to 48 to raise the limit on how much the government can borrow through early December. The US government spends more than it earns in taxes, so it borrows money to run its agencies, from defense to education to healthcare. The bill will lift the debt ceiling by $480 billion, increasing the limit on cumulative debt to $28.9 trillion. Now, despite a looming possibility that the government would default on its repayment for the first time in history, which the Treasury Secretary said would happen on October the 18th, political wrangling continued for weeks. A credit default would have a devastating impact on the US economy and global financial markets. Here's what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say.
Republicans played a dangerous and risky partisan game, and I am glad that their brinksmanship did not work. For the good of America's families, for the good of our economy, Republicans must recognize in the future that they should approach fixing the debt limit in a bipartisan way. What is needed now is a long-term solution, so we don't go through this risky drama every few months. And we hope Republicans will join in enacting a long-term solution to the debt limit in December. We're ready to work with them.
Okay, Yuka, so what comes next?
Well, the Senate vote has cleared a major hurdle, but now the bill will have to be voted in the lower chamber of Congress. The House is expected to come back from recess soon to pass the bill, which will then be signed into law by President Joe Biden. But again, the measure is temporary. The $480 billion increase is expected to be exhausted by December the 3rd, the same day that a stopgap bill voted earlier this month to fund most federal programs to avert a government shutdown expires.
So, Yuka, how are global markets reacting to this news?
Well, European markets opened on a relatively quiet note, with Germany's DAX just below the flat line after weak export data for August came out this morning. Asian shares are mostly up as Chinese markets reopened after a week-long holiday. As you can see there, Seoul's Kospi just down by 1/10 of a percentage point, but all up in the rest of Asia.
Well, next, Yuka, to a breakthrough in international efforts to tax corporate giants.
Ireland, as well as Estonia, have agreed to sign up to a global deal establishing a 15% corporate tax rate. It was a difficult decision, particularly for Ireland, which have kept its 12.5% corporate tax rate, the cornerstone of its economic growth, to attract multinationals like Google, Apple and Facebook. Ellen Gainsford has more.
It's an about-face for Ireland. Dublin has dropped its opposition to a minimum global corporate tax rate of 15% after negotiators agreed to cut the phrase "at least" from the agreement, which Ireland argued raised concerns over further rate rises.
It is a sensible and a pragmatic decision made by the government in the interests of our country, and ultimately a decision that I believe will be critical to conditions to create longer-term certainty for businesses and investors.
For the past 18 years, Ireland has had a low-tax policy, attracting tech giants including Google, Apple and Facebook, who all chose Dublin as a site for their European headquarters. Some economists say that raising the rate risks damaging Ireland's economy.
In the short term, a change to 15% would probably increase corporation tax receipts as you're charging a higher tax rate. But over the medium to long term, it's not clear what will happen. We're a small country with a small market. It'll be the large countries with lots of customers that benefit from this change.
The campaign for a minimum global corporate tax rate has been brokered by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. The change would only apply to firms with a turnover of more than €750 million. This Friday, 140 countries are meeting with the aim of finalising a deal. With Ireland and Estonia now on board, only Hungary is still holding out against the agreement.
And finally, from you, Yuka, flight attendant uniforms, at least most of them, have come a long way since the days of scarves, hats and miniskirts. But they're not necessarily the most practical, are they, Yuka?
Well, actually, we may not know this, but a lot goes into flight attendants' uniforms, including the need to use fabric that is fire retardant. So they're not the most comfortable to move around. SkyUp Airlines, a private carrier in Ukraine, has decided to at least put an end to high heels and skirts after hearing from flight attendants what they really wanted. Instead of pin heels, its cabin crew can now wear Nike trainers, a t-shirt and loose trousers. They'll also wear their hair in braids instead of a tight bun or a ponytail. Let's hear what they have to say.
И в туфельках, конечно, красиво тоже, я не спорю, но ножки, конечно, чувствуют. Это все в концу полета, а ноги отекают. В кроссовках, конечно, ну, что вам сказать, классно. Это максимально удобно, потому что и не находится, да, на подъеме ножка. И...
Выяснили то, что, несмотря на то, что образ бортпроводницы очень романтичный, он предполагает много физической подготовки, и ребята на борту, они также отвечают за безопасность, поэтому форма должна быть действительно комфортной в передвижении.
Sounds like a lot of common sense, if you ask me. A little late in the coming, but better late than never, at least for that airline. Yuka Roye with a look through the day's top business stories. Thank you very much.